The North Atlantic was a broken mirror, steel gray and heaving, as dawn bled slowly into the clouds. Smoke clung low over the water, smelling of oil, cordite, and burning paint. Somewhere between the waves and the wreckage, the great German battleship Bismarck was dying. Her final hours had been loud, violent, and merciless. Shells tore through armor, guns fell silent one by one, and men ran through flooding corridors with no clear direction left to follow. Orders were shouted, then lost. Steel screamed, water rushed in, and on the deck, unnoticed by history in that moment, was a black and white cat. He had no rank, no nationality, no understanding of why the world was ending around him. His fur was soaked with spray and smoke. His paws slipped on oil-slick metal as the ship listed hard to port. Every instinct in his small body told him that something was wrong, terribly wrong. The cat had been brought aboard months earlier as a ship's mascot, a common tradition among sailors. Some said he belonged to a crewman. Others said he simply appeared one day, as if the sea itself had delivered him. On the Bismarck, he was known as Oscar. As the battleship rolled, lifeboats were smashed or burned before they could be launched. Men leaped into freezing water, knowing the cold would kill them within minutes if the drowning did not come first. The noise of battle faded into a deep, terrible quiet, broken only by explosions from within the hull. At approximately 10:40 a.m., Oscar was thrown into the sea. The water was shockingly cold, an instant paralyzing force. Around him floated wreckage, oil, and bodies. The ship that had carried him into war slipped beneath the surface, taking over 2,000 men with it. The Atlantic closed, indifferent, and vast. Somehow, the cat found a piece of floating debris. He clung to it, claws embedded, his body rigid with fear and cold. Above him, clouds drifted. Below him, the sea swallowed everything else. Hours passed. When rescue finally came, it was not for him. Warships were pulling survivors from the water, moving quickly, knowing submarines could still be nearby. A sailor looked down and saw eyes staring back-eyed, against all expectation. The cat had survived. The sinking of the Bismarck was one of the most dramatic naval episodes of the Second World War, commissioned in 1940. She was among the most powerful battleships ever built, designed to dominate the Atlantic and disrupt supply lines. Her very existence altered naval strategy, forcing fleets to hunt her across thousands of miles of open ocean. For the men aboard, life before battle was a mixture of routine and tension. Watches were stood, guns were cleaned again and again, meals were eaten quickly, often in silence. In such conditions, animals became something more than mascots. They were reminders of normal life, of warmth, of homes left behind. Oscar became part of that fragile balance. He slept where he could, often near engines for warmth. Sailors scratched his head as they passed. In a steel world built for destruction, the presence of something small and alive mattered more than anyone admitted. There is no record of Oscar reacting to flags or uniforms. He did not understand ideology, borders, or orders. He understood hands that fed him, footsteps he recognized, and the vibration of the ship beneath his body. That simplicity would later make his story endure, because it stripped the war down to its most basic truth. Survival is not selective. When the Bismarck broke into the Atlantic in May 1941, she became the focus of a massive pursuit. Aircraft, cruisers, and battleships closed in. Damage from earlier engagements had reduced her maneuverability. By the final morning, she was surrounded. After her sinking, British ships began rescuing survivors, though the effort was brief and dangerous. Submarine warnings forced them to withdraw quickly. Only about 115 men were pulled from the water. Among the floating wreckage, Oscar was spotted by sailors aboard the destroyer H. At first, they thought he was debris. Dang, remove it. A sailor leaned over the side and reached down. The cat did not resist. He was hauled aboard, soaked, shaking, but alive. No one knows why he survived when so many did not. There was no logic to it, no explanation that fit cleanly. He had simply endured. The crew named him Unsinkable Sam, a dark joke born of shock and disbelief. War had taught sailors to cope with horror through humor because the alternative was unbearable. Sam lived aboard Cossack for several months. He adapted quickly, finding new places to sleep, new hands to trust. The ship continued escort duties in the Atlantic and Mediterranean. Danger did not leave him behind. In October 1941, Cossack was struck by a torpedo from a German submarine while escorting a convoy near Gibraltar. The explosion tore open her hull. Fires spread. The ship began to sink. Once again, the sea rushed in. Once again, Sam was thrown into chaos, not of his making. And once again, survival would demand more than luck. It would demand time, endurance, and the quiet refusal to disappear. The torpedo strike on HMS Cossack was sudden and devastating. One moment the ship cut cleanly through calm water. The next she shuddered as if struck by a giant fist. Steel plates buckled. Compartments flooded almost instantly. Darkness swallowed sections of the ship as power failed. For the crew, training took over. Damage control parties moved without hesitation. Orders were passed by voice when systems failed. Men carried the wounded through smoke and broken ladders, stepping over twisted metal still hot from the blast. Somewhere amid the confusion, Unsinkable Sam was once again running. Animals sense danger differently from humans. They do not analyze or hesitate. They react. Sam darted through corridors filled with unfamiliar smells, burning insulation, seawater, fear. He slipped on angled decks as the ship began to list. Hands reached for him, missed, reached again. Cossack did not sink immediately. She stayed afloat long enough for most of her crew to be evacuated. Tugboats attempted to tow her to safety, a fragile hope stretched over days. During that time, Sam remained aboard, fed and sheltered when possible, as the ship slowly surrendered to the damage within her hull. On October 27, 1941, the attempt failed. Cossack finally slipped beneath the surface. Sam was found clinging to a plank, floating alone. He was rescued again, this time by the aircraft carrier HMS Ark Royal. The irony was cruel. Ark Royal was one of the ships involved in the hunt for the Bismarck months earlier. She had helped cripple the battleship that became Sam's first grave. Now, she became his refuge. Aboard the carrier, Sam became something more than a mascot. Sailors whispered about him, half joking, half serious. 2 ships sunk. 1 cat survived both. In a war defined by statistics and loss, Sam became a symbol of irrational hope. Life on Ark Royal was different. The deck thundered with aircraft, launches, and landings. The smell of fuel was constant. The air vibrated with engines and shouted commands. Sam learned where to hide during flight operations and where to sleep when the ship settled into night watches. But war does not care for symbols. On November 14, 1941, Ark Royal was torpedoed by U-81 off the coast of Gibraltar. The explosion was not immediately fatal, but flooding spread rapidly. Efforts to save the ship continued through the night. Power failed. Lists increased. The crew prepared to abandon ship. This time, evacuation was more controlled. Nearly all aboard survived. Sam was found sitting calmly on a board, his fur dry, his posture strangely composed, as if the sea had finally accepted him and chosen not to take him. A sailor lifted him without a word. Ark Royal capsized and sank the following day. 3 ships. 3 sinkings. One catch. After that, the Navy decided Sam had seen enough. He was sent ashore, first to Gibraltar, then eventually to the United Kingdom. He lived out the rest of the war on land, far from torpedoes and steel decks, cared for by sailors who understood that survival does not always follow reason. Sam's transformation was never about bravery or choice. It was about persistence. He did not fight. He did not command. He endured. In a war where millions were crushed by forces beyond their control, the story of a small animal surviving again and again does not diminish human suffering. It highlights it. It reminds us how thin the line is between life and death, and how little logic there often is in who crosses it. By the end of 1941, Unsinkable Sam was no longer at sea, but his story had already sailed farther than any ship he had walked upon into memory, rumor, and the quiet need to believe that survival sometimes is possible. By late 1941, the war at sea had stripped sailors of any belief in certainty. Ships vanished between one dawn and the next. Men learned quickly that survival was not always earned. Sometimes it was merely permitted. Within that fragile mental space, stories took on unusual weight. Unsinkable Sam's survival across multiple sinkings became one of those stories not as superstition, but as a quiet challenge to despair. Aboard HMS Ark Royal, the cat's presence felt different from before. On the Bismarck and Cossack, he had been just another creature sharing cramped steel quarters. Now, sailors watched him with curiosity, even unease. 3 sinkings were not coincidence in the minds of exhausted men. They did not believe Sam caused a disaster, but they wondered what it meant that he walked away from it each time. War compresses time. Days blend into watches, alarms, and false dawns. In that rhythm, Sam moved freely, sleeping through engine vibrations, appearing beside men during long, silent moments. Some sailors spoke to him without realizing it, as if the cat carried no judgment and required no explanations. He listened without understanding, which was sometimes enough. The idea that formed among the crew was never written down or spoken aloud as a plan. It emerged slowly through glances and shared silences. If this cat could survive when ships could not, then perhaps survival itself was not completely arbitrary. Perhaps endurance existed outside rank and firepower. That fragile belief mattered. When Ark Royal was struck by the torpedo on November 14th, the ship did not erupt in chaos. Damage control teams responded immediately. Bulkheads were sealed, pumps were activated. Men worked knee-deep in water, knowing that speed was the difference between rescue and burial at sea. Throughout the night, efforts continued to save the carrier. Tugs strained against heavy seas, attempting to bring her into port. The ship listed more with each hour. Equipment slid, passageways tilted into unfamiliar angles. The possibility of saving Ark Royal narrowed until it was gone. Abandoned ship orders are among the hardest commands to give. They acknowledge finality, they admit that effort has reached its limit. As lifeboats were lowered and rafts filled, sailors scanned the decks one last time for men, for memories, for anything not meant to be left behind. Someone asked about the cat. Someone else went looking. Sam was found not hiding, not running, but sitting. He did not cry out. He did not struggle when lifted. His stillness struck those who saw him. In the midst of flooding compartments and listing steel, the cat's calm felt almost defiant. Not heroic, simply present. The impossible idea took shape then, not as hope of saving the ship, but as resolve not to lose everything. If something as small as a cat could be carried through this destruction, then perhaps humanity itself was not entirely consumed by the war. When the last men left Ark Royal, Sam went with them. The carrier capsized and sank the following day, her hull disappearing beneath the Mediterranean. Another name was added to the list of lost ships. Another chapter closed, but Sam's story did not end with the ship. It shifted from survival at sea to survival as memory, from accident to symbol, not of victory, not of defiance, but of endurance without intent. The rescue of survivors from Ark Royal was swift and disciplined. Ships could not linger. Submarines remained a constant threat, unseen and patient. Boats pulled away as soon as they were full. Engines turned. Distance was life. Sam was carried aboard one of the rescue vessels, wrapped in a jacket meant for a human body. He trembled only briefly before settling, his breathing shallow but steady. Around him, men sat soaked, wounded, or silent, staring back toward the place where their ship had been. No cheers followed, no sense of triumph, only relief layered over exhaustion. When the rescued sailors reached safety, word of the cat spread quickly, not officially, not through reports or commands, but through conversation. That cat was on the Bismarck, he was on Cossack too, and now this Facts were checked, names were compared, timelines aligned. The story held. Naval authorities did not encourage myths. War demanded clarity, not legends. Yet no one dismissed the cat's survival either. He was real, his presence documented, his rescues witnessed. A decision was made quietly and without ceremony. Sam would not return to sea. There was no punishment in this choice. It was an act of care. After 3 sinkings in 6 months, no one believed testing fate further served any purpose. Sam was transferred to shore, first to Gibraltar, where he lived among naval personnel in offices and residences far from open water. On land, Sam changed. The restless pacing of a ship was gone. The constant vibration beneath his paws vanished. He adjusted slowly, sleeping longer, moving less urgently. Sailors who visited recognized him immediately. Some smiled, some simply nodded, acknowledging something they could not explain. Later, Sam was brought to Britain, where he spent the remainder of the war in quiet conditions. He did not know the war ended. He did not understand surrender or victory. He understood warmth, routine, and the absence of alarms. The high drama of his life had passed without his consent or comprehension. Historians would later debate details, names, dates, the accuracy of certain accounts. That is the nature of wartime memory. But the core facts remain unchanged. A cat survived the sinking of the Bismarck HMS Cossack and HMS Ark Royale. He was rescued each time. He lived in a conflict measured by millions of deaths. His story does not alter outcomes or strategies. It does something quieter. It narrows the lens. It reminds us that war reaches everything, men, machines, animals without distinction. And sometimes, inexplicably, something survives. Not because it deserved to more than others, not because it was protected by fate, but because survival in war is often unreasoned. Unsinkable Sam did not conquer the sea. He was spared by it. When Unsinkable Sam was finally removed from operational service, the decision carried no symbolism at the time. It was practical, almost administrative. War demanded constant movement, and there was no place for sentiment aboard ships that might vanish without warning. Yet, in retrospect, that quiet choice marked the true end of Sam's journey through history. Unlike battles or commanders, Sam left no documents behind. His legacy survives through ship logs, sailors' recollections, and later naval histories that confirm the unusual sequence of events. The facts, sparse but consistent, place him aboard 3 major warships that were all sunk within a single year. Few humans experienced such repeated survival. Fewer still did so without agency or intent. His story gained attention after the war, when distance softened trauma and allowed reflection. Writers and historians included Sam not to lighten the narrative of the conflict, but to illustrate its randomness. The Second World War was not shaped solely by strategy and power. It was shaped by chance, by weather, by timing measured in seconds. Sam's survival fit uncomfortably well within that truth. Importantly, his story does not romanticize naval warfare. Each sinking he survived resulted in significant loss of life. The Bismarck alone took over 2,000 men with her. Cossack and Ark Royal claimed more. Sam's survival stands beside those deaths, not above them. It does not lessen their weight. Animals in wartime are often overlooked, yet they share the same dangers without understanding the causes. Sam did not choose sides. He did not recognize enemies. He responded only to noise, motion, hunger, and fear. That neutrality gives his story lasting power. It strips away justification and leaves only consequence. Naval museums and archives today occasionally reference Unsinkable Sam as a footnote, a curiosity, but footnotes matter. They show how war extends beyond strategy rooms and command tables into every living space it touches. Sam's survival did not change the course of the war. It did something smaller and perhaps perhaps more human. It reminded those who knew his story that endurance does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it floats, silent and shivering, waiting to be noticed, in a conflict defined by destruction. The fact that something fragile endured without reason, without explanation, became part of the historical record. Not as inspiration, not as myth, but as evidence of how unpredictable survival truly is. Unsinkable Sam lived the rest of his life far from the sea. Accounts place him in Britain, housed in quiet buildings where the sounds of war were distant and muffled. There were no engines beneath his paws, no alarms tearing through his sleep. For the first time, routine replaced vigilance. Those who cared for him knew his past. They spoke of it carefully, never as entertainment. The war was still ongoing, and loss remained immediate. Sam was fed, sheltered, and largely left to rest. His presence was calm, almost grounding, as if he carried exhaustion on behalf of those who had seen too much. He died sometime after the war ended. No exact date survives. That absence feels fitting. His life had never followed documentation or intention. He entered history by accident and left it quietly. Today, Unsinkable Sam endures as a reminder of scale. World War II involved nations, armies, ideologies, and industries. Yet within that enormity existed moments and lives untouched by meaning or purpose, only by consequence. Sam's survival forces us to confront how arbitrary fate can be. His story is often told briefly, sometimes humorously. That approach risks misunderstanding. Sam is not proof of luck, destiny, or protection. He is proof of exposure. He was present where destruction occurred repeatedly and lived while others did not. That fact should unsettle us, not comfort us. There is no lesson in his survival that can be applied cleanly. War does not reward innocence. It does not punish guilt consistently. It simply acts. Sam happened to endure its motion. For audiences today, far removed from the smoke and cold of the Atlantic, his story offers a narrow window into the lived experience of total war. Not through speeches or victories, but through the quiet persistence of a living being caught in events far beyond control. Unsinkable Sam did not understand war. He did not remember nations or flags, yet his life intersected with some of the most violent moments of the 20th century. That intersection is enough to warrant remembrance. In telling his story, we do not celebrate survival. We acknowledge it, we place it beside loss, and allow both to exist together, unresolved. That balance is the truest legacy Sam leaves behind. This is the history of World War II. Whoever oppresses the innocent is an oppressor. Neither the earth belongs to this oppressor, nor does the sky belong to him. We stand, now and forever, with the oppressed. This is WW2 Files. See you in the next one.